This is why I practiced for so many hours. I would learn the Beethoven, but then I would play around with the Beethoven. I also love hip hop growing up. And so I was listening to lots of different music. Purpose is not the thing you do. It's the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. Do not wait around to be discovered. Discover yourself instead. I knew I had a gift because...
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast where I bring you the best and the brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, I have a great guest today for so many reasons. I've had the honor and pleasure to watch her perform and present, Jade Simmons. She is known as a powerhouse speaker, musician, CEO, and minister, known for inspiring people to live boldly and embrace their full potential. A classically trained pianist, she has been dubbed as classical music's #1 maverick for blending classical and rap music in her live performances, which she delivers to the audience ranging from corporate events to churches. I'm not even going to do the whole bio read. I'm going to let you guys enjoy this one. She is incredible. She is amazing. Jade Simmons, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. I'm so honored to be here.
I threw out that whole intro. And that's what we do as entertainers. We feel it. And we're like, you know what? I'm not even going to go down that path. So let me give everyone just a real quick story here. And Jade and I were talking about it a minute ago. My wife had the opportunity to enjoy Jade's performance at an event last year in Dallas. She came back ecstatic, elated. Oh my God, I just saw the most amazing performer ever. I can't even explain it to you. It was a blend of music, affirmation, words. And I'm like, all right, let's check out Jade Simmons. And then we went to Will Guidara's Welcome Conference about a month ago here in New York City at Lincoln Center, which as a performer is like holy grail kind of stuff right there. And I got to experience the Jade Simmons experience, like Jimi Hendrix up there, the Jade Simmons experience.
That's right.
Up there. So Jade, first and foremost, thank you for blessing me and my audience with your time and generosity. Certainly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for sharing your platform.
I know a little bit about you, but my audience doesn't know a lot about you. So a question that I love to ask, and I think this will set it up for our audience. Tell us a little bit about what your parents did for a living.
Oh, that's great. I don't think I've ever gotten that question before. So my mother, as far as I remember, as long back as I remember, has always worked in higher ed in the college system. She's always been like the administrative support to the different college presidents or the deans. And then my father is a civil rights activist. And so I grew up in this interesting household in Charleston, South Carolina, where there was an era where my mother worked at the Citadel Military College for one of the higher ups. And my father protested outside the Citadel Military College.
Conflict of interest?
A little bit of a conflict of interest there. So I had a very interesting upbringing for sure.
Now, what was it like at home? Did they get into it at the dining room table, or they were aligned on the same civil rights movement, rights and everything?
They did. I think my mother being a country girl and my dad was the, city boy from Charleston, South Carolina. I think she was attracted to, in some way, his militancy, his willingness to stand up, push against status quo, speak out on issues that were important. They were too young to be in the core of the civil rights movement, so to speak. But my father was greatly influenced, and so was my mother, by that era. And I always say, though, my parents are separated for years now. And I always say the issue is that my mother was married to the church and my father was married to the movement. Ooh. So it really informed me and my sister, our upbringing, I think in a very powerful, positive way, actually.
Let's dig into that a little bit. And I want to understand the power of religion and faith and how the two intersect and how you could have strong faith but not be religious.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of what religion has come to mean. That being said, I am extraordinarily full of faith. I'm a person of faith. I am an open Christian. It's a very specific faith for me. But as I look at how religion has been used over time by man, that's where I take issue. My father is a very spiritual man, but pretty much avoids church like the plague. So that's where the problems arose. But I'll tell you what, they both are, and my sister would agree, she's 12 years my junior. They both are the reason that we feel so 100% confident that we are on this earth for a reason, that we have huge missions to fulfill, and that the mandate is on us to uncover purpose, to walk powerfully in it. And if we ever see something that irks us, we're not allowed to complain. We have to figure out how we would solve it ourselves.
But looking at the influence of your dad fighting injustices.
Yeah.
When you put that together with purpose, and you saw his purpose, and you saw your mom's purpose, those early, do you remember going back to an early age, the first time you looked at your dad, what he was doing, and you're like, my dad is doing something over here.
Yeah.
He's got
Yeah.
purpose. Like that first feeling of what purpose meant. I know for me, my parents were teachers, and I saw it early on. Both my parents are educators, 30 years New York City Board of Ed. And their purpose was to raise great kids in the New York City area.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know if I would have had the language for it. I remember being very young, definitely under the age of 8 or 9. And my father took me with him to a KKK rally that he was protesting.
Fun outing, Dad.
Yeah.
Tell us about that one. We didn't share this story on stage at Lincoln Center.
No, we didn't. I remember being on his shoulders and watching this parade of men and women who were openly racist, openly KKK, openly hate-filled. And there was a little boy on his father's shoulders in that march, marching with the KKK. And I remember that just being this moment of what he was allowed to spew out of his mouth and encouraged to say out of his mouth towards me. That I will never forget that. But instead of being traumatizing, it was eye-opening that how powerful parents were, that they really are the first teachers, and whatever we learn from them is what we will have to either live with or go to therapy for the rest of our lives. That was a huge moment for me. I remember that.
When you think about it, kids are sponges. I have a 12-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I think about my 6-year-old a lot too, where he's a 6-year-old boy right now, of how he's a sponge. And sometimes he might watch something on YouTube and he'll say something. I'm like, bro, you can't be saying that.
Can't say that.
That's not, but he doesn't know what it means.
That's right.
And I think about that little boy on that man's shoulders right there. He had no clue. He didn't know what hate was. He was just repeating the rhetoric that his dad was saying out there. And that's such an interesting moment. And thank you for sharing that. I can't even imagine, first of all, the bravery of your dad to be there. There's a potential for violence. It's a powder keg, and he's bringing his little girl over there. God knows what the hell could happen.
Yeah, I should say my dad's a bit of a powder keg himself. So I tend to back down. I think that's the lesson that I learned from him, in the good and in the bad way, which is I've learned from watching my father what battles to fight. And I've learned from watching my mother that for us, God's a part of every decision we make. I always say I have a bet with God. These stages you mentioned, Lincoln Center, and sometimes I'm in these incredible rooms with some very famous and powerful brands and organizations. And the running joke that God and I have is, listen, Jade, he says, they don't invite me in, but they invite you, and I go wherever you go.
Oh my God, I got the chills on that one. I love that.
He piggybacks. And when you tell me what your wife felt, and when you tell me the goosebumps that you felt when we were together in New York, the literal prayer is, if I am in this room for only one person to be awakened to something that's in them that's been dormant, something that they've been delaying on doing, that the world is literally waiting on, then that is worth the trip, it's worth the practice, it's worth the customization. I'd never done that presentation wrapped in the theme of hospitality. That's something we did for Will.
So let's take a left turn here. Based on your experience as Will, and I assume you read the book. I read the book, which was freaking incredible. Based on, how do you interpret hospitality in your line of work?
Yeah, it's what I was saying, I think, in the beginning of that presentation at the Welcome Conference, which to me nowadays, hospitality is about getting over yourself and really seeing through to the needs of the people who you're assigned to serve. If we could live that way, it changes the way we communicate, especially in the more friction building arenas like politics, like religion, like war and peace. I think it changes when you can say, let me just step outside of myself for a minute. I do have goals, aspirations, and an agenda here, But how do I step outside of that to serve more deeply? And I think I also said that hospitality, it's this, when you get it and it's unexpected, it's this reminder that, you know what? The world isn't all that bad. People aren't all that bad. And when a perfect stranger treats you as if you were family, or as if you were, heck, let's just say it, worthy of wonderful treatment, it reminds you that you are. And that's a really powerful superpower to be able to operate within.
I love that take
Yeah.
on it. So let's dig into the musical journey, which is at your core. Let's take it back to that those early days. You remember the first time you sat at that bench behind you and struck
Mhm.
the keys? What
Mhm.
was that feeling like? When did that light bulb go
Yeah.
off?
Man, the literal piano behind me, my husband got for me. We're high school sweethearts. And so when we
Aw,
first got married and moved to
God
Houston
bless.
for grad school, he was the only one with a real job, so to speak, at the time. And so he got me that piano. And even though I'm a Yamaha artist, I can have a big 9-foot big Yamaha in here. That's my kind of reminder of where we came from. The first time was in my home, and my mother also plays. And so I was used to seeing her play. She played at church as well. And I always wanted to play, but for whatever reason, we didn't start lessons until I was late. I think that's because she didn't start playing until she was late. She also has the gift of playing by ear. So that afforded her that opportunity.
That's interesting. Here's a fun story. I never shared this on the air. My dad's father was born in 1901. He was a doctor here in Brooklyn. He delivered Neil Sedaka into this world.
No way.
Neil Sedaka taught my dad how to play piano. Young
Oh
Neil
my.
Sedaka taught my dad how to play piano. Now I feel like I'm incredibly not instrumentally musically inclined, but I have an ear. I love music, eclectic
Yeah.
blends of music. So I have that from him. And I'm trying to encourage my kids to play a little bit, but it's not there. Jade, when did you know that did you know that you had a gift or that you were gifted musically?
Yeah, I loved it right away. And
Which is important.
I always wanted to practice, that's a sign because most kids are like, they didn't want to practice for their piano lessons. I knew I had a gift because I was playing I was playing music by people I'd never heard of. Didn't grow up around listening to Beethoven or Mozart, but I instinctively understood how to play their music. And I think classical is in a world of its own in that we go to school to learn how to interpret Mozart. There's a very specific way you
Hmm.
play Mozart. It's a very specific way your hands move when you play Rachmaninoff. It's all very specific. There's performance practice and tradition tied to each of these eras of music. And I just understood it. I had a really big appetite for emotional music. I poured a lot of emotion into my music. And so as a young player, that was what was notable was, man, she is a wise old soul. She seems to understand the Rachmaninoff, those sorts of things.
And I noticed that when you were playing too, and the way you present yourself on stage, I'm not getting technical here, but the way
Yeah.
you hit the keys, the way your hands are, your body expressions, there's a
Mhm.
flow to some composers, and there's harder, softer. There's a whole
Yeah,
world to.
there's a whole world.
But do you have to do it that way? And I'm sure you've messed around with this. Have you tried playing Rachmaninoff like Beethoven from a
Yes.
stylistic? It just doesn't work
It's
from your
not
own
that it doesn't
interpretation.
work. I think what I noticed coming up was the opposite. Most people played everything the same.
Hmm.
So now they might have
Note for note.
gotten, yeah, or the technique was wonderful and they got the performance practice piece of it, but there was no difference in the soul of the Mozart and the soul of the Beethoven.
Hmm.
Might have been flawless execution, but for me, I move a lot when I play. And when I was younger, I moved a lot. And so that was for better and for worse, depending on which competition I was doing. But I couldn't imagine not moving. And I would see these other pianists sitting there up straight. And I'm like, I don't know how they can even sit still. This music is so moving.
And you think about that too, the growing up musically and people learning to play note for note. And then when that mindset comes in of your own interpretation, that's where the real creativity as a musician starts. You could learn to play an instrument note for note,
Yeah.
but actual creation and reinterpretation. And you shared the story on stage, that first song that you composed yourself. Tell us
Yeah.
about that kind of thought process early on. Were you just
some
messing
of the
around? I got this.
messing around. Yeah, this is why I practiced for so many hours. I would learn the Beethoven, but then I would play around with the Beethoven, particularly the bass line. I also love hip hop growing up. And so I was listening to lots of different music, But then when I would get on the piano, I would hear Beethoven. The bass lines were incredible to me. They sounded like a great hip hop bass line. Bach to me sounded like jazz. I could hear jazz. And so I was always switching up the rhythm. Rhythm is a huge through thread. For me, I played in the drum line in high school. I played in the drum line in college. I started a percussion and dance ensemble called Boom Shaka at Northwestern University that still exists today. But rhythm was that thing that kept coming back. And I think even today, when I'm working with people in coaching situations, what I'm helping them do is to uncover what their unique rhythm is and how they are designed to move through life uniquely.
A classically trained pianist who incorporates rap and other genres into her music. I love talking hip hop. Who inspired you? What was your jam?
My parents again came into play here. My father listened to a lot of stuff like NWA. His rap was a little more hardcore, and more conscious, right? It's more Black conscious type rap. And then my mother didn't want me to listen to any of it. And so I always had this balance. So a lot of why I created music is because I wasn't allowed to listen to a lot of secular music and a lot of music that had profanity and these sorts of things. So I had this craving for rap and R&B. I loved Missy Elliott because when she came out, and Timbaland, they were innovators and they changed the sound. They also changed the representation. Missy did not show up in the same way as some of the women who were really popular at that time.
Lil' Kim, right?
Think of Lil' Kim. It was just a very different element. It wasn't body first, sex forward. She had a whole different persona. And the fact that she literally changed the sound. So when I'm playing things for the audience, I'm talking about that power we have to change the atmosphere, to change the sound of a room. And Missy Elliott is a great inspiration for that.
For me, if I'm being literal with it, when I listen to Nas or Wu-Tang, specifically Wu-Tang too, they sample and create. I think about the RZA from a production standpoint, a musical genius, but he's sampling those sounds and even like "Ooh Baby I Like It Raw," like it starts on, that's where it comes from, and he builds it up from that. Anyone right now that's like blowing your mind, whether it be a hip hop, rock, from a instrumental piano standpoint, anybody's bringing it back?
I wouldn't say actually in the world of rap and hip hop. I think mostly actually what I'm really excited about are these kind of new jazz artists like John Batiste.
Oh, so good.
Classically trained, but he's just creating these new sounds and he's not allowing anybody to box him in. And he's facing the same sorts of criticism that many of us artists face who dare to go outside of our genres. We're either accused of watering down the art form or not being able to make it in one art form. And that's why we're playing with all these things. But to me, it's the most natural expression. It's what Beethoven and Mozart, that's what they were doing in their era too.
It's so crazy to look back. Like Beethoven, they had no idea that they'd be
Beethoven.
No, it was just Beethoven, right?
That's
It was just some dude playing. Now, I want to move into your career now.
Yeah.
When was that moment where you're like, all right, I'm going to take what I'm doing and I'm going to bring this to an audience and I'm going to start to talk about my journey. Yeah. And let me bring the piano up here and mess around, see if the audience likes it.
That wasn't the intention. The only thing I ever wanted to do, Adam, was just play Lincoln Center. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to play recitals, orchestra, and I did that. I did that for the first few years of my career. And as I say on most stages, I had this really unexpected bout of stage fright and memory slips, which I had not had as a kid. And so that was really shocking and overwhelming. So going from a
pure recital into more of a keynote type presentation,
that's right.
You would think it would be, hey, I'm on stage, I got this, but it was different.
No, because that world is, first of all, let me just say, I love the world of classical music, but it is a very restrictive, very literal world. And for whatever reason, I was coming out and not being able to deliver in the way that I did in the practice room, right? So as I say a lot of times to audiences today, I started speaking to the audience in between the music, just to give myself a little bit of a chill break. The speaking took on a life of its own. I did an event where I was speaking and playing a little bit, and the mother of a CEO of the Food Market Institute was in the room, which I'd never heard of. That's where Kraft and Hershey's and Campbell's get together to meet. And she called her daughter and said, you need to have this woman come speak at your event. And the rest is history in terms of where the corporate world found me. And I'd never done really a keynote with piano yet. where the music was a part of the lessons that I was driving home. So today, that's what I'm known for in the speaker world, in the corporate world. I'm brought in to speak on just about any topic. Adam, I can frame a keynote around almost any topic for just about any industry.
Hey everybody, I want to talk about a product and platform that I absolutely love and our latest sponsor, Interseller, the prospecting and outreach platform of choice for recruiters and sellers. Whether you're doubling down on business development or recruiting talent, Interseller does all the heavy lifting of finding contact data, automating the email and follow-up process, and syncs all that rich data into 20 plus CRM and ATS platforms. Reach out now and get going on a 2-week free trial and let them know you heard about it from Adam on the podcast today. Check out the link on the website. Appreciate it.
Do you think of it musically, composition-wise, when you're planning your keynote? How does that thought? But let's dig into that a little.
Yeah,
I found it fascinating. You interwove that beautifully. And I could also see, because I do keynotes, I'm starting to do more of them too, and I see your arc. And I watched attentively how you presented yourself and how you told your story. And I was literally making notes on my phone. I'm like, go back to Jade Simmons, find her more on YouTube, dig into that.
Yeah.
You wove it perfectly. Is that do you think about it musically or visually? How does that work?
A lot of it came very naturally, and then I would analyze it afterwards because I would have other speakers say, oh, I noticed you're doing this and you're doing that. And I'm like, oh, am I? So there's a lot that comes from performance naturally, which is I have a read on the audience. I care so much about the audience's journey. I am afraid to death of them being bored, right? So my arc moves pretty quickly. I know where I'm taking them. For instance, when I bring people on stage, that's always going to happen after the 30-minute mark because I need to build rapport for that to really go over, for the people who come on stage to trust me, for the audience to cheer them on. That doesn't work as well if I did it in the first 2 minutes of the performance.
You can't give it away.
No, so there's an arc there for sure. I think musically, I am thinking about variation. Remember, I talked about that emotional variation that I had as a kid. I want you to feel everything. How many feelings can I get you to have before I'm off the stage? And lastly, I don't want you to only be inspired. I want you to be activated. And so, speaker tip, I started listening to what people were telling me after the engagements. And there was a common thread, which was, I feel like I can do anything now, or I feel like I can finally go and do this
Empowerment.
thing. Yeah, there was an empowerment, but more specifically for me, there was an activation because they actually went and did it. So now that I knew that was happening naturally, I intentionally build that into the presentation moving.
And you landed the plane. That was a big one for me. You got to land the plane. You got to land the plane.
That's a good point.
If it's over and you're like, what the hell? What? And then what do I do here? I'm working on a keynote now, and I'm trying to think about how I land the plane.
Yeah,
that's like
it.
Let's talk about like that. Like, how was that transition in building conversations? You're talking to Pfizer, Chick-fil-A, all these major corporations, and really incorporating faith and purpose into a corporate presentation. How do you blend those lines?
No one ever brings me in to talk about faith, right? So what happens is where my specialty lies is in really finding out what the company really wants. What is it you want to have happen in the room by the time I leave? And if they say, oh, we're working on reinvention, or we just had a big merger, so we're dealing with change. First of all, I get really obsessive compulsive. I set Google alerts for all the companies that I'm with. I know what's going on in the stock market about them before I come in. I remember speaking at Raytheon, and the day before they'd lost a $3 billion contract with the government. But I knew that, so I was able to weave a lot of that into the presentation. I'm going to learn the language. If I'm going to financial services companies, some people are called advisors, some are called associates. You need to know that. Because when you speak to that audience, they can tell if you're regurgitating. Yes, they know if you're just regurgitating the same keynote you did last week, or if you've really given some thought to who they are.
Wow. I want everyone out there, this is a master class on public speaking and the amount of work that goes into it, to not phone it in, to prep, to really research it, and not just regurgitate the same keynote. Like, one of the things I've heard with speakers, you should have 3 or 4 kind of columns, verticals, different kind of talks that you're doing, but customize them. Don't just go up there. You could tell if someone goes up there at a keynote and you're like, I heard this 3 months ago when they were on stage in the city or in LA or something. I want to shift gears a little and talk about your other creative side, which is writing. Your book, Audacious Prayers. 2 questions. The first one is, who is this book for? Who should be reading it?
Yeah, I wrote another book recently called Purpose the Remix.
I was going to get there.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying.
Let's talk about it together. Let's talk about it together. We'll lump it in. Let's get it in.
Because that book, Audacious Prayers, really set a lot of people on fire in ways that I hadn't expected. That was one of those things I wasn't going to write because I thought, who wants a book about prayer by a pianist? Because that's when I was solely focused on my music career. And a book publishing friend of mine, a self-publisher, he said, everybody needs to have faith to do whatever it is they're called to do. And so that book, Day by Day, gives you what I think are some unusual ways to pray bigger than we have before. I really feel like God is much bigger than we give him credit for. And I feel like our prayers were too small. So you'll see very specific ones in there, like a prayer to scare away the riffraff, because as an entrepreneur, listen, I've had enough.
What's a prayer to scare away riffraff?
That's the people, especially as entrepreneurs, but I think people in general, we run into that dangle carrots. They create more chaos in our lives. Time suckers. There's actually a separate prayer for that, for energy vampires.
Yes.
And then there's a prayer for just extraordinary belief, right? A prayer for Mother Teresa-like generosity. If we're serious about changing the corner of the world that we've been assigned to and gifted, then we have to begin to see the world in a different way and behave in a much bigger and bolder way. We must expect more of ourselves and more of the world around us. So those prayers give words to that.
As an artist, as a musical artist, did you take that mindset into crafting and writing the book? I want to talk about the creative process a little bit. And what was it that was different that maybe it hit you like, whoa, I thought I could do this musically, but this is a different beast here. It's a different medium.
Yeah, no, this book really came out of my own kind of journaling. I would journal these prayers, and this friend that I let read a couple of them said, I think you're onto something here. So that was the easiest thing I'd ever written because it literally just came out of my heart. I didn't know, Adam, that I prayed differently until I'd be in settings and people would say, okay, well, you pray. And then I would pray and they go, I didn't know we could talk to God like that. That's not how you talk to him.
That's why I talk to him.
Yeah, that's how I talk to him. So that's where that book came from. That one was an easier one to write for sure.
What did you learn about yourself during that process of writing that first book? What was that aha moment for you?
That I moved apparently differently, that I believed in possibility much differently than most folk. And so I got very curious. I think this now comes out in my keynotes of how could I spark that same type of audacity. I can look and find a thread of audacity through my entire life, Adam. I was always doing what I wasn't supposed to or what I was told I wouldn't be able to. And that is the permission that I've always given myself. I think it's the permission my parents gave me. And so if I can extend that permission to anyone who reads that book, then I feel like I've done something worthy.
Permission, purpose, command. I would love if you could share one of your hits for me that you did on stage at Lincoln Center, not with the piano. I would love for you to share your definition of purpose.
Yes. Purpose.
Play it back for me. Play it back for me, Jade.
Yeah, this little statement changed everything. I say purpose is not the thing you do. It's the thing that happens in others when you do what you do. Yeah, that little ditty there.
Chill.
I said it because I found it out for myself, right? I thought my entire purpose was to play that piano behind me. And while it is a gift, it's a vehicle for my purpose. I'm not limited to those 88 keys. And I think in a world where people like you and I and others listening in are so multifaceted and multi-passionate, we've been told often we got to choose one thing. And I think the one thing is actually purpose. And once you know what that is, you get to ride that out in multiple vehicles for the entirety of your life.
Oof. I remember sitting there at Lincoln Center. We were on the top looking. We were right by the stage. We were right over there.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was taking pictures. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, she nailed it. Because I've been thinking about this for a while. People, if you think like the classical Simon Sinek why kind of version of that and purpose and everything, but that definition itself, and we're going to clip it. I'm going to share it. I want everyone to let that sink in. And then think about how you interpret that, right? This is Jade's definition of purpose. What could you learn from that? How could you adapt to that? And how could you incorporate that into your life? When was the last time you bombed on stage?
Probably in my classical career. Let me knock on some wood here. I've never personally bombed in terms of what I was speaking. My technology, though, has failed me.
Well, everyone's been down there before. But it's how you adapt to that, right? How do you bounce back?
No, it's how you adapt to it. It honestly works for me. I'd be lying if I said I want my technology to bomb, but I'll tell you every time it has. It's made the presentation even better. I've gotten engagements out of the bombing. The way you recovered, we just come teach our team about resilience or about dealing with conflict and change. I was like, I can do that. I mean,
But that's what pros do. But that's what pros do.
It is.
You go up there. We're tremendous live music fans, and to see how artists adapt, how they change when something's not working, and maybe the technical element of the show is not going in the right direction, or you got to go off script there. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something critically important, not just to you, but to really top of mind right now is mental health, and you're a huge advocate of it. You testified in front of Congress. What was that experience like? What did you discuss?
I was so young, but I was probably like 22, 23. I had done the Miss America pageant, believe it or not. I was first runner up at Miss America, and my platform was youth suicide prevention and mental health awareness. And that afforded me the opportunity as Miss Illinois at the time to go to Congress and testify. I think Danielle Steele, the author, was also testifying because if I'm remembering correctly, I think her son had completed suicide. And I had spent a year traveling the nation, meeting families who had dealt with this crisis and inspiring kids to find passion and purpose in life. And I think it's where whatever empathy I naturally have was definitely increased during that year. Mental illness, at least especially, we talk about the stigma now, but there's an extra layer of stigma in the Black population, especially when I was coming out with this. It wasn't stuff that we talked about. I remember having my grandmother didn't get a diagnosis of bipolar disorder until she was probably 3 to 4 years away from passing away. So she was in her late 70s when she found out. But we had dealt with that mental illness, not knowing what it was as a family for years. And families find this weirdly interesting way of coping, but there's so much shame that the actual person suffering never really gets the help that they need when that stigma is there.
Why is there such a strong cultural stigma in the Black community around that? And I've heard this before, and I've also heard a lot more from what I've learned on the male side too.
On the male side, now this was, almost 20 years ago now when I was originally working in it. So some of the stats have changed, some have not. What was interesting at the time when I was first studying this issue was that scientists were actually studying the Black family as preventative ways in terms of mental health and for restoring and sustaining mental health and for preventing suicide because Black people had such a low rate. What they were noticing over time is that as the Black family and population integrated more into society as a whole, we saw these numbers of mental health and mental illness rising. Men in general, right? And the stereotype is that guys have a harder time talking about their feelings.
It's not open to talking about it with their friends.
Also in the Black community, years ago, the church was a much more vital player in the family. It's not as much over the last 20 years. Less of the younger generation goes to church, less and more of that younger generation also goes to therapy. So there's a replacement.
Church is therapy.
Yeah. And so for a lot of people, church was serving that role. And so as you saw the lessening of church attendance, we did see a rise in mental illness. I don't know what the numbers say today, what the most recent stats are, but I know that we're still seeing large numbers of suicide completed. Still normally, I think white men, Black men come after that in terms of the numbers there. And young people, what is it, 15 to 24, 34? It's still really big numbers there.
And it's a really important cause for me. And it's something that I try to do by bringing different guests on my show who are advocates. Specifically, I try to focus around men's mental health. I do a lot of work with Movember and some of the guests I have tomorrow on around that too, because it's okay to not be okay. And I will say it till I'm blue in my face. And everybody, male, female, I don't care what you are, who you identify as, check in with your friends.
Yeah.
And
that's good.
It's not just a simple, hey, are you okay? Be like a real, genuine check-in.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there, they don't have anybody checking in on them. So think about your friends and family. Think about older relatives. Aging is sad. I'm watching my wife's grandmother go through this with dementia and everything. And it's not like this is just what's happening.
That's right.
Check in on everybody. Look out for everybody. Like, let's spin it to a positive note here. Let's talk about the future. We have a crystal ball in the front of us, Jade. Jade, what are you working on? How you keeping this routine fresh? What are you dreaming up there in the lab over there?
Oh man.
How you gonna remix the Jade Simmons experience?
Listen, this is my lab time. I try to take mostly October, November, December off to receive all my divine downloads. That's when I'm understanding
Divine
what the next
downloads.
year. Yeah. Because if we keep moving, and I think especially as a speaker and a performer, we want to be booked, right? And so I really want to create towards the end of the year. So for sure, November and December, I think I only have one engagement in November. And I'm buying this electric violin. And I went to hear this incredible jazz ensemble called Pieces of a Dream. Talk about watching people work through the tech difficulties. Like, I enjoyed that the most out of the whole show. There was a guy playing guitar, and I thought, okay,
the big
why have I never?
Oh no, the
one
keys,
that looks like
the piano with the keys,
kind of turned, looked like
the
a
80s
guitar.
thing,
yeah. And I thought, oh my gosh, how have I not done any of this? There's also, I used to use a lot of loop pedaling, and where I could record your voice and then play it back. I want to bring that back because I want people in my audiences to hear their voices in the room, not just mine. So I'm really.
So if you're recording the audience without them knowing them, play it back and maybe get a reaction in there.
And remix it and then put it in the music where you hear your voice come back. I think that's so symbolic, right, of what we want to happen in our lives, that we want to know that we're heard and that our voices matter and that it makes good music. So I am just excited to play. Most people who know me know that most of December and November, I'm going to be in a onesie. So don't call me. Don't ask me to go anywhere.
I'm not moving. And have you thought also about how, like, incorporating like the visuals, like messing around with like visual experiences?
Yes. And my tech team.
And AI, cool stuff.
Yeah. My tech team is like, oh, what else are we adding? But there's an incredible keynote speaker. I hope I say her name, Sylvia DeGiusto. And she uses this really cool film screen. It's like an almost invisible screen that comes down and projects some 3D video, and she speaks behind it. And we were wanting to add some kind of video element as well, so you could maybe see, images coming out of the piano as I play. You guys got a slightly scaled down experience. I actually travel with a guy who used to be in the group Stomp, and his drummer and DJ, and they help me expand the musical experience as well. So they come with me on some of my bigger shows.
Have you ever seen the full Jesse Itzler experience with his DJ on stage?
So I think my guy Alec does some stuff with them as well. So
he was the first speaker, and I've been to a lot of conferences, and it's a lot of the same. Jesse gets up there. It blew my mind, not just the content and the story, but then he had his DJ up there and he would incorporate some hip hop into it. He wrote the original Go New York Knicks, the Knicks jingle and everything.
Okay.
So he tells that story. He incorporates it. But the moral of the story here, folks, is always be innovating, always be creative out there. Jade, as a business owner, what is that big challenge for you right now?
Oh gosh, this is the toughest year we've had probably since COVID. This is tougher than post-COVID for us. We had a lot of turnover on my team. And a lot of the people that turned over were really responsible for some of the big initiatives we were going to launch in 24. So to suddenly not have those team members, to suddenly not be able to launch those efforts powerfully, to be in a slow season where speaking is concerned because we recently, just full transparency, raised our fee. So now we have to do that work.
She's worth it, folks.
That we have to do that work of getting into that client base that doesn't bat an eyelash at that new fee. And they are there, but we have to work into that. So we had kind of this perfect storm. We're building a media studio here in Houston. So we had this perfect storm of business slowing down, but overhead increasing. But I'll tell you what, and you'll see this in Audacious Prayers. When these things start to hit like this, we know this is the stretch. There's no time for demoralization. We understand that
Keep going.
You could only be hit this hard. Only a worthy opponent is worthy to be opposed. So the more the blows come, we understand, the other side of this is going to be good.
Resilience.
Right?
That's all on the other side.
We're excited.
Listen, it's adversity, and we're built for this, and we take those punches. What's keeping you up at night these days?
Half of what I just told you.
Yeah, it's like,
I'll tell you what, without getting way too into the political scope of things, I am disappointed in our country and how we behave towards each other. I believe the parties are supposed to exist. They're supposed to serve us. And I think right now they are destroying us. They are not serving us. They're pitting us against each other for the purpose of attaining and retaining power.
By design.
Yeah, by design.
Evil way.
By design. Now,
I'm with you on that one.
I'm a staunch independent. So my Republican friends, my Democrat friends know that I'm always devil's advocate in the room. But I think we're better than this. I ask myself, are we there yet? We're not there. But even Frederick Douglass said, if we could just be who we said we were, man, we'd be somewhere. And in the future, I hope to play a role in getting us to live up to the purpose that I believe we're destined to have as a nation. But I don't think we're there yet. And I think we're going to look back on this era and be a little bit embarrassed about how we behave towards each other. But I think it'll be a good lesson learned when it's all said and done.
What's the first step we need to take? How are we going to get back to? Listen, we're recording this on the 23rd of October. This show's going to come out after the election. God knows what's in our hands, and it's. We're recording this not knowing. We're recording this right now.
Not knowing.
And this race is, if you look at the polls and everything, and listen, we're not getting into politics. We're not taking sides here. I'm with you. I'm an independent. I see, I'm not even going to say it. Like, I see what people are saying about both sides, and I could objectively understand why some people lean towards Trump. I can understand why they go to Kamala. I can understand why they don't like the other side. But the one thing I really need to see is don't equate someone's political affiliation with who they are. Don't lose friends over this. But isn't that, Jay, part of our founding father? Like, it's a freedom of speech and belief. As long as you're not spitting out hate, you could believe in a candidate. You could follow a party. Yeah. Just don't let it divide you, and don't identify someone. Oh, my friend's a Trump supporter. They must be a piece of shit. No. Yeah. You can't say that.
No. You can't. And I have very close family and close friends on both sides of the aisle, and we can get into it policy wise. It's hard to pinpoint. They have a hard time pinpointing me because I am, again, staunchly independent. You asked, what do we have to do? What's the first step? I think it does require a different type of leadership. I think right now we probably have exhausted what the current political system is set up to do. And I think the people will have to rise and create something new. And I think the leaders that step up must be those who innately, Adam, prioritize people over politics. Amen. Until then, we're going to see more of the same. But I believe there is an era coming where new leadership is going to rise.
I just pray for my kids, and I hope that us as adults in the room could really remember what's important is the future. Our time on this earth is limited, and we have to when I think about legacy, my legacy is making this world a better place for my kids. Jade, let's bring it home here. What is the single greatest piece of advice that you've ever received that you take action on every day?
It's actually a piece of advice that I give, which is do not wait around to be discovered. Discover yourself instead.
Boom. Last but not least, you have achieved, by textbook definition, incredible levels of success in your career. Success for everyone is different. Mm-hmm. Jade Simmons, how do you define success?
Wow. At the end of a really great keynote, what I am checking for is not the standing ovation. I am looking for this feeling that sort of feels like exhaustion, but what it really is being spent. And it means that I poured out everything that was given to me to give to others. And I can tell that they received it. So thank you again, Adam, for receiving and being so generous. Please thank your wife for me as well.
Will do.
Because it lets me know that I'm doing what I was put on this earth to do.
Jade Simmons, everybody. And check out more at jadesimmons.com. Where else could they find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
I love to hang out on Instagram at official Jade Simmons. And Adam mentioned speaking. If you're wanting to really blow away audiences in the new year, we have a program called Command. And it's helping you be the biggest version of who you already are on stage so that you can change the lives you're assigned to.
Jade Simmons, everybody. I want to thank you so much for your time, your generosity, sharing your story, sharing your wisdom. This has been an incredible conversation. Folks, if you want to find out more, head over to thepodcast.com. Sharing means caring. Please leave a review rating. It goes a long way. You could find out more on our socials. Check out Jade. Check everyone out. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.